Hello everyone, welcome to this video review of Arteza's marker set. They are called the Everblend art markers, and they are alcohol markers made by the company Arteza. So a while back, Arteza contacted me to do some reviews of their products in exchange for sending me these products to try. And I've already done several, and you can see those reviews on my channel. And I agreed to do this, number one, because I really believe in finding supplies at all price levels. Not all of my students can afford the highest priced art materials, and so I think it's really important to try things at all price levels. And Arteza makes student grade products that are aiming to be professional products. I'd say they're not quite at that level, which is reflective by their price, but they are very good quality for the price. Now, they also offered me an affiliate program, which allows me to share links to their products that people can buy, and then in return, I would get a payment for anything that people bought through my links. And I refused that because my personal stance is I don't like to take money for reviews. Sending me the products is fine. I use them, I pass them along to my students in my teaching studio. So that is good enough for me. And I also feel like I can give a better, more honest review if I'm not receiving further compensation for it. So that's where I stand with that. So there's also been, when I first encountered the company and I did some research, their main corporate office is in Delaware in the United States, so they call themselves an American company, and it has been brought to my attention, and upon further research, I have found out that they do manufacture a lot of their products in China and other places. Now, I realize that this might be a drawback for some people, so I think it's important to be clear about that. It's not so much a drawback for me if they have good business practices and they're putting out a fair product for the price. Many of the art supply companies that I've used over the years manufacture their products in other places. Some also manufacture them in the United States. So if that is something that's important to you, you need to do that research on all of your art supplies to see where they're coming from. Even some of the handmade materials that I purchase, the makers purchase their materials from places that might be sourced from other countries other than the United States. So if that is something that really matters to you, then you need to investigate that yourself. So that's not really a part of my review, but I feel it's fair to mention it. So the Everblend markers come in this huge bag. I got the set of 120. They also make other sets that are much smaller, but I really wanted a wide variety so I could try many different types. They also sent me the package of their skin tone markers, which is a wonderful addition to the pack of 120. They also sell one of gray scale colors, but many of those are already in the package of 120. So you can see all of that information on their website that can inform you on which set is good for you to purchase. But I have the 120 set, including the set of skin tone markers. So this is going to be really cumbersome to show you, but I want to show you because this product comes in this wonderful big bag. It even has a zipper on the back where I've put some extra markers that don't fit in the main compartment. It's a really sturdy bag. It's really great to use for all the markers, and it comes with this tag that shows all of the different colors and their color numbers, which is very useful. Okay, and they come organized in a specific way when they arrive, which I promptly dismantled and organized them in my own way. I did swatch all of the colors. I don't feel like I need to do that for you because there are many videos that do that already. And what I want to do is I want to show you how they work for me and in my practices and what I found useful about them and how I think they perform. So this bag is great. It has a carrying strap. It has that zipper on the back. And it has these clasps on the front and a Velcro. So just in case you don't do the clasp, the Velcro is quite strong. And when you open it up, this is going to be awkward because it's big. The markers are are arranged this way. And if you open the sides, whoops, I don't always put them back in neatly when I'm using them quickly. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. But these little sections kind of flip around, and you can organize the markers the way you want to. Mine's messy because that's one thing, they're all attached with these red elastics. And while it's really useful, and when they're stored upright, which is great for ink flow, but you do have to carefully put them back in. And so sometimes when I'm working in a hurry and I can't get them back in, I'll just put them in. So that's just me. You might be better at sticking things back where they belong, but that's just not my forte. So this is the main set of markers, and I'm not going to dwell on this because I'm going to tell you what I did. So let me close this back up. It is a really, really nice case. I'm going to move this aside, and I just spilled my paint water. So let me just remove this. I didn't mean to do that. I use this space for painting videos too, so I always have water nearby, and the case is so big it didn't fit well here. So what I did is I went through and swatched all the markers, and I have them here in a basket that are all the colors that I use for my daily work, sort of my own personal palette. This will be different for everyone, right? But the markers are in here. I have yet to find a better solution, but I think what I'm going to do is order sort of one of those plastic trays that you can slip the markers in and out of. But for now, they're in here, and it's easy enough for me to gather the colors that I need. But what I really want to show you is what I've been doing with them. Okay, so I have 3 books here. And I think it's really important to mention that alcohol markers cannot be used on just any paper. Okay, so I have found 2 papers that I really like for now that are in sketchbook form. And one of them is this sketchbook by Stillman and Byrne. It is their Zeta series. And I'm just going to go through and show you some of what I've done. So when I first began, I just started using the markers in ways to make simple drawings, right? To see how they worked for me. The only other tools I used were a pencil at times, or a colored pencil, and a white gel pen. There is no white in alcohol markers. It doesn't work that way. So you need some kind of a white gel pen to put white highlights on things. It does come with a colorless blender, which has proven to be really important for how I'm using them, okay? So I'm just going to sort of flip through things and talk about, here's some tests where I was just testing all of the colors to sort of find my palette. And then here, these are the colors that I decided upon for my own personal work. So a note about that, coming in 2020, I have 2 big projects that I'm working on that are more illustrative in nature. And so I've been really considering using markers for part of it, right? And when I did my research originally, the markers that everybody seemed to be talking about were Copic markers. And when I researched those a little bit further, the price was really high and sort of prohibitive for me to try a wide variety of colors. I still think I will try some, but there's a big price difference between these Arteza alcohol markers, the Everblends, and the Copic markers. So the Copic markers in my area are about $7 a piece, okay? And the Arteza break down to less than $1 a piece, sometimes even less, depending on the set that you get. So for me, that's a big factor, the price factor. And so I did some research after Arteza contacted me about these markers, and all of that, you can search YouTube for these videos where people that are very used to using markers have compared the Arteza Everblends to the Copic markers. And a lot of the times people are just as happy with the Arteza as they are with the Copic. They both have pros and cons, right? And one of the big cons for me is the price for Copic markers. But the color palettes Copic has an infinite number of colors. I want to say over 600, and Arteza might have less than 200. So they still have some room to grow there, and maybe they will bring out more colors. But for me, the colors right now that I found are super. And the only thing I could complain about really with when finding my colors is their numbering system. So sometimes they're all started with the letter A. So like Copic, they are organized by color group. So they might have a BV series, so blue violet, or an R series for red, or a YG for yellow green. So it's a little bit easier to organize things by their numbers and not so much by their colors. There is a little bit of method to their madness. For instance, like this one here is A752. This is A753, A754, 55. So they do kind of go together, but the A does not tell me much, obviously. Okay? So these are the colors that I chose and the colors that are in my basket here. All right, including the colorless blender. So I continued to play with the colors on this paper, and what I noticed is there's very little bleed, which is a big thing with alcohol markers. And what that means is, let's say I choose a color and I want to fill in an area, and if I go right up to the line to fill in, okay, the markers will pretty much stay within the boundaries that I apply them to, okay? If I go too close or right over the line, the marker will bleed out of the line. This is typical with any alcohol marker, okay, and on most papers. Some papers are better than others. This one, the Zeta series, is great. So bleeding is something that you're just going to deal with, and you have to find the paper that works for you. All alcohol markers will bleed. The other thing all alcohol markers do is go through the other side of the paper. No matter what paper I've tried, this happens with all different kinds. Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else in here in this book. I think that's it. So this is the Stillman & Birn Zeta series. This one is the Moleskine, okay, the art line sketchbook. So it's the regular sketchbook paper. It is not watercolor paper. If you use watercolor paper with markers, you are going to run out of ink very quickly. The paper is too absorbent and it sucks all of your ink into the paper, and it does tend to bleed. You can get some beautiful effects, but it's not the most economical way to use an alcohol marker. So this book is more, I have loved this paper using these pens, and I've heard that the Copic markers also work very well. Any alcohol marker is going to work well on the Moleskine paper, okay? So you can see how I've done some little tests here of mushrooms. And then the only thing extra I added was white gel pen for these white marks. And I'm very, very happy. So I often will draw with a colored pencil first, and then even sort of make an extra line on the outside of my work. That's just a stylistic thing. So if you see these little marks, that's because I drew them later, okay? So it says, this is what happens when you forget a blotting paper. The markers will go through to the back side, and then they will stain the previous page. So what I do is I put a piece of watercolor paper in between the page that I'm working on and the next page, and then I just clip them together so they're secure, okay? Let me go back to here. So you can see, and that happens with all alcohol markers. It doesn't matter which brand, they're always going to go through, okay? So the colors can be very, very light and delicate, right? And they can also be very strong. I'm terrible at drawing people. I'm working on it. But you can see the beautiful effects that you can achieve. So when you see this here, this is actually using two colors and then using the colorless blender to sort of blur the line between them and give a little bit of a more painterly effect. When I just use the colorless blender, it tends to give a lighter area with a ring around it, which is actually part of the process that I'm doing when I'm working with these pens. So I think using the colorless blender is something that you just have to try yourself and see how it works for your style. If you want a very clean, a clean look without any variation in tone, you probably aren't going to use the colorless blender as much. You'll use it in a different way, but I like to use it to give a more painterly effect to the alcohol markers. Here's another place where I was testing other colors. You see how this goes straight through the paper. And then this is another area where I was testing colors and choosing the colors for my palette. And then I ended up writing down all of the names of the colors that I really liked and getting rid of the colors that I thought didn't quite fit in. And this is for a specific project. So I do this a lot. I choose my color palette, right? So all of these colors are the colors that I chose eventually and that ended up in my basket. And then here are just some other items that I made with these pens, which I think are really lovely. And again, these are just sort of tests. I'm just sort of figuring things out, right? I've used a gold gel pen on this one, but I'm very, very happy with the way these markers work. They're working really well for me. So this is a study that I did of the Aquarian Tarot, and I did 2 cards, and I basically did all the line work with the Copic multi-liner, which is a permanent black ink, and then I used the markers to fill in. All right, almost like a coloring book. I created the coloring page and then colored in, and then I used some gold watercolor for accents here and there. And I did the same thing for the Queen of Swords. So you can see you can get some really beautiful, subtle effects with these markers, which I'm just thrilled about. Okay, they work really well with multi-liners. They work really well with graphite. I've colored directly over graphite here, so I can get some subtle shading that way. All right, so that's it for that book. And then this is just another moleskin book in a larger size. And I've done some of the same kind of tests here with these colors. And you can see the bleeding is great. There's just no problem as long as you're using the correct kind of paper. Okay? And you can see how it bled through and went to the next page. So what I thought is I would just use the markers for a minute and just sort of show you how they work. And if you are interested in trying a more illustrative style or doing some more mixed media work, these are a really affordable and fun way to get into an alcohol marker without spending the hundreds of dollars you would need to spend to get the same quantity of a Copic marker. Okay, at $7 a piece, you can see how this would be very, very expensive to choose the colors that you really want. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to stick with mushrooms because I really like them and they figure in to my my project. All right, so I'm gonna draw a mushroom here. It's pretty light, so let me just make that line a little bit darker. This is just a colored pencil that I can erase if I want to. It's a color erase pencil, so you can actually erase it and it doesn't affect the paper or the drawing. And I'm gonna grab a few colors here. So let's see, I really like, I'm gonna use this jasmine yellow and maybe this Spanish red, and there's a blush gray, and maybe, let me just see if I have a couple other ones that I want to use here. So again, this is not the best, situation for organizing your markers, but it's all I have for now. That's why I'm rushing through it. And this is a colorless blender, which I will show you. So I have been starting with lighter colors first. And so I think for the mushroom itself, I think I'm going to use this Rusty Rose. Now the packaging is beautiful, just like with all the Arteza products that I've tried. And it basically says the name of the marker on it. There's nothing else written on the actual marker. And you have two symbols here. This one is for a fine point, and this is for a chisel point. I personally use the fine point side almost always. Some people prefer this side, so it just depends on what you like to do. So I'm going to go ahead before I color my mushroom, and I'm just going to show you how these lay down. So if I'm using a chisel point, I can cover a broad area really quickly, which is important if you're working larger, right? And with the finer point, it's going to be a smaller area, but I have much more control, okay? And what you'll notice is, unlike other markers, when you're coloring, they blend so beautifully into the paper. You can get a really smooth application. If I go over it a second time, it is going to darken it a little bit, okay? And then they sort of blend together. All right, so you don't see the line demarcation so much. These markers work terrifically that way. The blending is really smooth. So you can see I have a natural gradation from light to dark. And then I could take my colorless blender if I wanted to, and I could blend out a little bit at this end to make it even lighter, okay? But what I find happens with a colorless blender, so let's say I just put a stripe of it through the middle here, is I get this lovely sort of watercolor hard edge effect, okay? Now it looks a little yellow right now. That will disappear as it dries, and then you just sort of get this lovely sort of washy, bloomy, hard edge watercolor effect. So if I'm painting with the markers, and you know, I've got a petal of a flower, for instance, and then I go back with the colorless blender, and maybe I want to add in, you know, some texture on the petals. This allows me to do that. I don't know if this is the correct way to use them, but it's the way I use them, okay? So I can even, I could even go around the edges of it, just sort of haphazardly, right? I like to be very loose with my work, and it's going to give me sort of this mottled effect. I know with some of the leaves that I've done, where's some green? Let me see here. I have one that I really, oh, this one. This is called green tea. And let's say, you know, I'm coloring in a leaf, and maybe we've got another one coming out this way. And I still tend to color in direction of form, okay? And then if I use the colorless blender on it, maybe I want it to look more painterly on the inside, so I can go in and I can draw. And it's going to give me a little bit of this sort of expressive effect that I really like, okay? So that's how I use the colorless blender. Again, if you are someone who wants to learn traditional methods with markers, there are so many videos that you could look into. So I'm going to start by coloring in the top of my mushroom with Rusty Rose. And I think I'll just start at the top, and I'm just going to go ahead and color right up to my pencil line. And just pulling the marker through, and it might be a little bit streaky at first. That's why I go in direction of form, because by going in direction of form, any kind of streakiness from the markers is going to be part of the drawing, correct? So I just start filling in direction of form. And sometimes I'll sort of connect it like that. and just fill in. Now, I could also use this side of the marker, the chisel side, and I could get a smoother application, but I don't have as much control that way. I'm really more partial to using the smaller chisel, the smaller sort of bullet tip. And you can see, and I have noticed this with a few of the darker colors, that you can see a difference between the way the ink flows out on the chisel tip and the bullet tip. All right, I'm going to use a little bit of a darker color. So this one is A621, this is A615. So they're sort of in the same range, right? And I'm just going to put a little bit of this darker color along this edge and a little bit down here. And I just sort of clean up my edges. And I might feather in a little bit more. Okay, and then I can take my colorless blender and just sort of paint with it on top. Especially up here where the highlight might be. And just give it a little bit of a more painterly effect. And then for the bottom part, I think I'll go really light. And I wanted to find this quartz white. And I'm using an up and down stroke because I want a little bit of the paper to show through with that. And then I'm going to go over, after that dries a little bit, I'm going to go over it. I don't know, I really love what happened there with that hard edge, but I still think I'm just going to put a little bit more of the rusty rose on top. And then use my chisel point to clean up my edges. Again, this is a very new medium for me. So as I'm showing you this, I'm still learning about them. And then I think I'll put a little bit of shadow under here. Use my colorless blender. And then go back to the rusty rose again and put even a little bit more, because by going over it more than one time, you get a little bit more darkness there. And I can even go with a more purple color. So I have like a blush gray, which is this one right here. And I use this a lot for shadows on cooler colors. So I can go in with this blush gray and add a little bit more color there as a shadow. So once I'm done with coloring in, I usually take my pencil and I outline my object again, because I want it to be very loose. I don't necessarily want my edges to be perfect. I want to see this pencil line that I've created. It's just part of what I like to do. I'll go around it a couple times to sort of emphasize that. Okay, so now that I have that, I can go into a white gel pen. I'm going to give it just a minute to dry. Okay, so that's kind of the way I'm doing this. So if I wanted to, for instance, make a leaf, And I'm making some leaf shapes. Coloring in direction of form. And then maybe I want to add a little bit of a darker color on them. And then I would hit it again with my colorless blender and just sort of make a circle. So it just softens it and gives it that lovely sort of, I don't even know how to call it. It's almost like a hard line in watercolor. And then I can go back in with my pencil and draw my lines around it. So sometimes I start with the lines if I feel like I need to, and sometimes I wait until I'm done. So again, this is sort of a really expressive style for me. It's not my typical work. This is all done with marker. So it's a different type of drawing for me. This is all marker. And I just love it. I absolutely love it. Layering these light colors. I typically like the lighter colors best. I use some of the darker ones for contrast. But I just love the effects that I can get. Love this one right here with the white gel pen. It really brings it out. So let me go get my white gel pen and I'm going to show you now how that works on top. Okay, so this is now dry. It's dry enough, and you really do want it to dry before you put the gel pen on it. And so the first thing I like to do with mushrooms is add some sort of random white spots. And I break the edge every now and then to make it look like they're sticking out. And I might put some little bits here and there. I might even decorate the edges with dots just to show where the edge of the mushroom is. Again, this illustration project is very fairy tale-ish, so and I might even put some little dots like that. So the white gel pen works really nicely on top, and sometimes you have to go over it more than one time after it dries. So same thing over here. I mean, I can put details on my leaves. So the white gel pen is actually really useful for my techniques, for the things that I want to be able to portray. And it works really well with this. So does color pencil, and quite honestly, so does watercolor. Watercolor will mix beautifully. The only problem is that because of the type of paper you have to use to get the Copic markers to work properly, or the alcohol markers to work properly, you have to use a specific kind of paper. And so textured cold pressed water paper is not going to be ideal. But I have on these used a little bit of watercolor mixed in. So this is watercolor right here in the background. That's the only place on here where there's watercolor. So I put some green marker down, and then I put a transparent silver watercolor on top. So they do work together, but you just have to consider the paper, right? It's not going to be quite the same as working with watercolor paper. You can see just using that colorless blender. Super cool. Love it. So I love these markers. I love the colors that I've been able to find for my palette. I think I don't have a lot of experience with Copic markers, obviously, so I don't know but I've watched a lot of reviews, and they're pretty much neck and neck. They both have their pros and their cons, but most people say that they're right on par as far as an alcohol marker goes. The cons would be you're not going to be able to find as many colors yet, and sometimes the colorless blender for seamless sort of blending, because the Copic markers come in so many more colors, you had more of a variety to choose from to get more of a step out in between colors. So for instance, between this Rusty Rose and the Spanish Red, there really isn't a color in between. So I'm not going to be able to get that seamless transitioning, which isn't really important for the kind of work I'm doing, but it might be important for the kind of work you want to do. So you can look at many videos on Copics to see how that blending is done. So I am really happy. I think it's a very good quality product for the price. Again, I've only used them for about 3 weeks now, so I don't know how long they will last. So far, they've been working great. I haven't had any trouble with them. I am really pleased. And so for me, it's a great value. And yeah, I'm just really happy with them. I will probably fill in a few of the areas in the more muted, lighter, pastel-y ranges of color with a couple Copic markers because there are some spaces I would like to fill for my own palette that Arteza just doesn't make yet. If they made them, I would buy it from them. So they do sell refill markers. You cannot refill these, okay, with ink. They don't have that yet, but you can buy refills of markers, of individual markers. I think they come 3 to a pack, but the price is still less than buying 1 Copic marker or 1 Copic refill. So Copic markers can be refilled. This marker, you could take it off, pour more ink in, and put the pieces back together. You cannot do that with the Arteza markers. I am not that heavy of a marker user at this time to even worry about that. So these will probably last me through my whole project. And if I needed to order a refill pack of a specific color, I could. All right. So that's it. I mean, I am not an expert by any means on markers, but from everything that I have tried, and you know, I'm so pleased. I couldn't be happier, actually. I am very, very pleased. So that's the Arteza Everblend art marker in the pack of 120, and I added the pack of skin tone colors. And if you are interested in them, Arteza did give me a discount code that will be in the description box along with links to all of those products. So if you did want to try them, you could get a discount on them. Again, I am not receiving any kind of compensation for that. But if you do think it's something you want to try, then use the discount. Get I think it's 10% or 15% off. I can't remember. So yeah, I'm really pleased. I'm going to keep playing with them and learning, and I think these are going to be great for my upcoming projects. All right, everybody, take care. Thank you so much for joining me for this review, and I hope it was helpful in some way. Again, I'm not... I use these in a very specific way. So if you're looking for something that's more in depth, as someone would use a Copic marker in a professional way, there are many, many videos on that. And I'm not qualified, and I didn't feel like swatching them all out would be a good use of our time together. All right, thank you so much. Take care, and I will see you again soon.